Hi, I'm Jeff Monahan, and you are listening to the Movie Raid Show.
It's time for the Movie Raid. Tonight we're going to go behind Day of the Dead with actor Jeff Monahan, that is played as the Steel Hat taking zombie. I want to know, how were you approached with this role? Did you just hear about it, or was it like Dawn of the Dead, where they just invite a bunch of people and everyone heard about it and then they just hop onto it, or did you have to do the usual?
I was just a young actor. I hadn't done too much, just a handful of plays, hadn't done any films, but I was sort of a go-getter about trying to get involved in things, and I heard that they were casting at George's office in downtown Pittsburgh, 247 Fort Pitt Boulevard. It was the known haunt of George, had been for a long time. So I just walked in. Off the street, and there was a woman there named Barbara, who was one of the casting assistants or casting agents on it. And I said, I'd like to audition for the movie. And so she said, oh, okay. And she handed me script pages for the role of Steel. And I was just 20-something years old, just kind of a geeky kid. Hi, I'd like to. So all of a sudden I'm reading for Steel. And it was the part where he's threatening to cut Sarah in half with a machine gun, Laurie Cordill's part. I was just some skinny kid off the street. So I did this audition speech, and she said, great, you want to be a zombie? Like, okay. So I was like, and that was it. And I was first a zombie in the mine on the first day that I worked on the film, just sort of a background zombie. So I was down in the cave a fair distance from the compound where they were grabbing the zombies with the hooks, Mark Tierno and Deborah Gordon. And we were supposed to hurry up toward them to try to eat them. And I was hurrying as far as was proper for a zombie. My motivation was just to get closer to the camera. I was just trying to do my zombie walk and lurch up there and as quickly as possible. And for some reason, somebody liked me enough to do something and came up to me and said, hey, would you like to come back tomorrow and be a featured zombie? I was like, yeah, you bet. I went the next day to be a featured zombie. That's how that came about.
And did you ever had any other interactions with all the other extras and whatnot? There's quite a bit of extras and featured zombies in this. Did you ever interact with anyone, or even share how to do what? Did anyone have actually an experience as well, or were they all pretty inexperienced as well?
There was mostly just inexperienced people, but fans. I mean, the zombies were by and large fans of Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead, as I was, and so it was just this incredible honor to come and be a small part of something like this. We only got paid $1 a day, and a hat. $1 and a hat, saying that said I sort of a painter's cap that said I was a zombie in Day of the Dead. But it was just basically people who knew of the films, who we knew instinctively how to walk and do our interpretation of whatever zombie type of thing that we wanted to do, and there really wasn't any reason to direct people in terms of that. It's like everybody was doing their own cool zombie stuff, so it was just fun working with a whole bunch of people. And even the actors, in the main roles, everybody was just sort of down to create the best spooky movie.
Who was actually involved as far as what kind of zombie you should have been? Did you have some form of input about that? What did you actually choose what kind of concept, or they ever had something in mind, like any background or anything, like any kind of motivation to give you? Or is like, here, this is what you are, and then you just got to have to figure out the kind of motivation of your own?
Well, it was the most interesting thing for me because I was made up by Howard Berger, who went on to win an Oscar, I believe, for Narnia, and he was a really great guy. And it was Howard and someone else. It wasn't Tom. It could have been Greg Nicotero, I'm not certain, but it was Howard, and he had an assistant. And I went into the big makeup room on the second day, and the first day I was just painted blue, in a sense. On the wall in the big makeup room, there were a bunch of masks, so they were close to the camera. With mine, they were going to do a full makeup. Howard really wanted to do something special, and so he wanted to have, I was going to be shot in the head, and so he had a latex piece over my face, which covered the forehead and part of the covered the eyes, actually, part of the cheek. Bullet hit was right in the middle of the forehead. And what they do is they attach a condom on the back of your head filled with blood, so they trigger that electronically, so the hole appears in the front of your head as the back of your head blows off. Which is very funny because Howard had the piece attached under the latex. He had the explosive charge attached already, and they were halfway done with the makeup. And he whispered to his assistant, he says, "Do you have the explosive facing the right direction?" And the assistant said, I think so. I'm pretty sure. And I'm laying there thinking, oh my God, if it goes off in the wrong direction, it's going to shoot me in the head. And then they laughed, and I realized they were just kidding with me the entire time. So they actually, did it properly. But as Howard got more and more into doing the makeup, he decided to make it like a drowning victim, and he sent the assistant outside to pick lichen and such off of out of the grass and things around the mine and bring it in and say, yeah, this looks great. Go out and get some more. So he just kept attaching more and more lichen, more and more moss. And so I became this swamp zombie. Chris Romero, George's wife at the time, came by and she called me Broccoli Man. Now, you'll be known as Broccoli Man. Anytime I sign at any of these conventions, that's what I use, Broccoli Man, because that came from Chris Romero. But it was just Howard getting very, very creative and very into it. And then he said to me when we took photos and things afterwards, he and I together, and he said, "Man, this is my favorite makeup of the entire movie. I'll send you pictures when I get back to LA." And I thought, no, you won't. Why would you send some kid from Pittsburgh any pictures? Come on. But I thought. And a couple of weeks later, after the movie wrapped, I get an envelope in the mail, and I open it, and there's all these great photos. He made prints. He sent me a really nice letter saying that, again, that was his favorite makeup of the movie. And so it was just an honor to be made up by him, and it was just great that it was his favorite makeup. But it was just this incredible look, very, very unique look, which I love.
How long did you actually had to stick around there? Not just like for the makeup aspect of things. Like, did you actually had to wait or anything like that for a notification? Like, okay, we're going to need you on these days or whatever. Was there a long periods of time? Did you actually have to travel back and forth, or was it just kind of like on most part on your end?
Well, you said had to stick around. It wasn't a matter of having to. I was loving it, so I would stick around as long as they would have me. It was probably more like a 10 or 12 hour day, both days, especially the second day, because the makeup took a couple of hours. But I was just thrilled to be there as long as possible. There is one thing which I had totally forgotten about, and then somebody reminded me of it sometime in the past year. There's a documentary about Day of the Dead, and I'm in it, which I had forgotten. In the documentary, it's like I'm sitting on a couch in full makeup between two girls who were working production, and we were just talking about the film and talking about the makeup and such like that. So I was down for being there as long as they would have me. And in fact, when I drove home with as much of the makeup still on me. It was just like, I just want to keep this on as long as possible. I'll shower when I get home. It was fine.
How was like the zombie scenes? Like when your time was coming up, like were you actually in a way roaming around with all the other zombies as too, or were you only in specifically that scene and then that was it?
I was only in that scene. Each of the zombie makeups, I was only in the one scene, and then with the one where Steele shoots me in the head, I was there actually around the corner. George himself is the one who shoves me through the doorway because I couldn't see where Gary Clark was standing when he's talking to Bub, doing his "Hey Bub" thing at the window. So George shoved me through. He grabbed me by the shoulders, took me by the shoulders, and he said, "Okay, I'll just get ready. When I want you to go, I'll just shove you through." And I said, "Okay, George," and through I went. And actually at that time, it had been hours since the makeup was done. And when the makeup was first done, and you can see this on different photographs that were taken of me, you could see my eyes pretty well when they first finished the makeup. But by that time in the day, when we were actually filming, the makeup, the latex had pulled away from the skin a little bit, which made the eyes seem really, really sunken in. My vision wasn't that great, but it looked really cool from the other side. So
Yeah, how was the actual zombie choreograph? Like, now you see in the scene, like they're all pretty well filed together and organized. But how did that directing process go? Was it like everyone has their mark? I mean, especially you couldn't even really see much, but did Tom Savini have a good majority of the directing, or Greg, or they all three of you kind of threw in their own part in that?
well, there'd be like zombie wranglers in a sense for the larger scenes when it was just a group of people and it was like, we need you to stand over here and we need you to walk forward at this point, and if somebody wanted to do something, yeah, go ahead and do that. For me, it was just those two scenes. And our direction the first time was just try to get up there and eat them. And the direction on the second time was George saying, I'm going to shove you through the doorway. So, and then I tried to actually even kind of elongate the scene for me, because after I'm shot and I drop out of frame, I had no idea what they were going to shoot next. And I thought, well, they might get a wide shot of the room. And so I was lying down on the floor, and there was a cabinet there, and I put my hand up through the handle of the cabinet and stuck a couple of fingers down through the handle as though I had fallen into the cabinet, and it kind of twisted my arm around kind of backwards. And they were like, "Oh man, that looks really cool. Get that." But it actually didn't end up in the film. They didn't use a wide shot in the film because obviously that moment was much more about Gary and Steele shooting himself. I was trying everything I can to milk it as much as possible, because it was great fun, and it was the first time I'd ever been shot in the head, so that was exciting. Because when you're squibbed, and I've been squibbed a number of times since, there's always that adrenaline rush, like, okay, they are going to press a button and something on your body is going to explode, and you have to, you're going to die. So hopefully not for real.
That is like a very small room for that fact. I mean, exactly, like, how far did you really have to go? Like, was it like pretty much an inch to you, or almost felt like a mile to you, because you couldn't really see much, but you had all these other zombies, like, literally not behind you, side of you, you got Steel in front of you, no less than not even a couple inches, and not only that, you also have the camera crew. Like, how was that process? Like, how was that even shot like that?
It was very, very tight, and of course the thing I was supposed to do was to grab the hat off his head, so of course the focus is like, okay, find his frickin' head and grab the hat off of it, so I got to grab the hat off his head. That was what I was told to do. That was the thing. It was pretty tight because, like you say, you did have the camera, the DP, everybody like smack in front of you, and the other folks around you, and being half blind because of the way the makeup was working beautifully, but my vision was somewhat limited, so you just kind of went with it. And the biggest challenge, I think, or the biggest thing that's on your mind when you do something like that is you got one shot at this, because they're going to blow a hole in your head, and if this doesn't work, or if you wander off camera somewhere, if you don't hit your mark, if you don't do it, are they going to re-rig you? Probably they may not, and it would take time and cost money and all that sort of thing. So you have to do it right the first time when you're dealing with a special effect like that. So it was something I was very thankful that we all pulled off together, and it worked.
Were there ever like any almost retakes of the gore effect? For example, originally the actor who played Steel actually recommended. Yes, thank you. He actually suggested to George Romero, saying, "Hey, I need to talk to you about my death scene," and wanted to do the death scene of himself in his own way. And the gore effect, as far as shooting him and whatnot, like, was this done maybe once or twice, or was this like pretty much a one take? Because a lot of this was on a tight budget, tight angling, just pretty much a quickie in a sense. Like even Joe Pilato's scene as well, he had to get it go. Like even the gore where all the blood's coming out is like, oh, shoot it. So was that kind of in the same way, in the sense of, for you, were you just kind of waiting? I mean, what was the thought process for you, just like in that one tight spot second, like at a young age, like what was really in the thought process for you on that moment?
Just don't screw up. That was the big thing, because as weird as it sounds, it's so quick and it seems so simple, but like I say, you're going to be shoved through the doorway. Don't hit the doorway. Don't trip over your own feet. Keep seeing out of the makeup. They're going to shoot you in the head. What is that going to feel like? I didn't know because it's the first time I'd ever done it. How much reaction am I going to actually have to do on my own, or what? Where do I end up? Because I was told to just like stagger off to my left because I'll be out of the shot and all that sort of thing. So at that point, but the biggest thing with that is you don't want to be the reason that the shot doesn't work. But with the effects that George's team, and this goes from Savini to Howard, all those guys, they're so good, they're so professional, and the actors care about getting it right. They're not there just for the paycheck or anything. We want to make this work. So typically there aren't retakes because, like you say, it's a tight budget. Be a major reset to do it, and you could do obviously acting scenes. You could do several takes and things like that. But with a scene with an effect, you really want to get it in one take, which is why often they use multiple cameras and things like that. But as far as I remember, there was only one camera on us for this as well. And of course, those days they're shooting film, so it's not like now where you can have all the freedom of digital, so it's expensive when you're running film through the camera. So the idea of just getting it right the first time is so important.
Now, how much time did you actually spend in this costume? Now, before the scene, like you mentioned, like you already had these appliances on for quite a long time, but before this scene even occurred, like as far as like, you know, you got to eat, you might have to go to the restroom or whatnot. Like, how was that? Like, did you have to leave that in the whole time? Like, especially the costume. I mean, how was the process of like having to stay in costume and having to go basically live in this for X amount of hours?
You just have to be very, very careful when you're like that, because I had lichen on my hands and the nails were done and all the rest of that sort of thing. So anything you do, you just have to be very careful not to mess that up. You know, and if a piece of lichen would have fallen off, which I don't know if anything ever did, but you know, it would be like you'd have to like judge. Well, geez, is that going to affect the look of me, or is that just a one little tiny quarter-inch piece of weed that's gone now? But like eating becomes an issue. I had teeth. I had false teeth in for it, but anything with makeup, even if you didn't have the false teeth, you have to eat certain foods and not eat other certain foods and drink through a straw and just be very, very careful. And as an actor since then, I mean, I always eat very gingerly on any film. I'll gorge like crazy afterwards, but I don't eat tons of food, which is always a little crazy with so much food typically being available on set, where you have craft services all day and amazing meals when they're served, but with makeup especially, you just have to be careful not to mess the makeup up. And so that's the first priority, at meal times and such like that. Yeah.
Was the temperature in that cave or any other parts of that area, did that affect you while you were wearing all that? Was it pretty comfortable, or was it just like, oh, I hope we just got to get to the scene before I fry to death or something like that?
It was pretty chilly. It was, I forget what the temperature was in the Wampum mine, but it's consistent. So it's like in the 50s. I think it's in the 50s in the middle of the summer. It's in the 50s in the middle of the winter. It's always like a particular, it only varies by a couple of degrees, but it was pretty chilly. But luckily I was dressed warmly enough, and I can't recall, they may have put long underwear on me underneath the suit. I can't recall, but that would have been a possibility. Pretty sure I didn't have knee pads or anything like that, since I wasn't supposed to fall, and that was my own anxiousness to say, I'll actually fall, and do that. But I don't remember being uncomfortable with cold in the mine, and the space that we were in when I was killed, that was a bit warmer. It wasn't out, in the heart of the mine itself, so that was a bit fine.
Now let's talk about the makeup. Being in this cave, and the actors and crew all had to deal with the soot that was going on in that mine, and they were coughing and sneezing, all that black stuff. Did it ever affect you and the other zombie actors, like as far as did the suit ever affect the actual makeup itself, or before or even during the filming?
No, I don't recall any issues with that. The place was pretty clean for a mine, which sounds odd, but it was used to store like RVs and all that sort of thing. So within the structure itself, the mine, it was basically a place where people kept their off-season RVs and such like that. So it wasn't like you're going into working mine. I did another film years later where we were in a working mine, and it was a concern, and they had to make sure they braced up the ceiling of this other mine where we had shot this other film, Out of the Black it was called. But that was a real working mine, so we had real minor concerns with that, major minor concerns. With this one, it was basically a storage facility, so there was nothing mine-like that would have gotten to you except for the chill in the air. So, but that it wasn't too uncomfortable.
Now, how long was the actual process of the makeup? Now, there was a test makeup, obviously. Was there a difference between the two, like as far as what they were testing with? How long did that take, and how long did it take for the final actual process? And then did that have to be reapplied later, or was it just like, boom, here it is, it's on you, and now you have to leave it on until you're seen?
It was all at one time. The first day makeup was just like, hey, paint them blue, paint them gray type of look, which was very, very simple. The masks, like I said, was sort of the intermediate zombies who would be closer to camera and have the rubber masks on, which I didn't do any of those. And then the other one was just, hey, put this guy in a chair and make him up as something. And then it was just fortunate for me that Howard got inspired and went with it. But it was a one-time thing, so it isn't like, hey, we're going to test this makeup and see how it works, and let's tear that off and try something else. It was just a matter of, it's like you're sitting down as an artist, as a makeup artist, I guess, you're going to sit down and you're going to make a painting on this person. And with me, because of the latex, because of the appliance that had to be shot and such, there was a certain technical element to it because of that. And then he could have just colored me, with blue and green and whatever. But when he had the idea for lichen, and I don't know where he got the idea for the lichen, he had seen it on the way in that morning. But when he sent the assistant out, like, let's try this, it just developed and took off. So it became very unique because of that. But there wasn't any sort of time to test or let's do a shoot and take a look at that on camera. No, it was like, hey, let's come up with something cool. And they were just flying with it. So the energy was great. The speed with which they worked was great. And there wasn't any waste. There wasn't any sort of, if this was a major studio production where you'd have to get certain things approved. And George stayed out of the makeup area in terms of any sort of input as far as it had to do with me, because he hired people that he trusted, and they were brilliant. So, and that's what he does. That's what he does with actors, and what I've done, other shows I've done with him, like Bruiser, years later. He just, hey man, that was great, man. Go. And he lets you do your thing. He does his thing. He lets you do your thing, and it all kind of comes together. No micromanaging from him, and he's just it's always been said like he was just such a nice, big, cuddly teddy bear of a guy, and that's what he was. So him trusting the makeup people to do what they do really allowed them free reign with their creativity, which was great.
What kind of material, at least if you actually heard of it, or what kind of material was actually used to apply for your makeup? Now, this is the kind of makeup that didn't exactly come off that easy as well. I've seen some of the actors really you basically might as well get a shovel try to peel that off.
Yeah. Well, they use spirit gum, very sticky substance that they sort of paint on, and then they attach the latex to that, and then whatever sort of grease paint type of thing for parts of you that would be like, for example, my neck was my neck. There was no appliance on the neck since I wasn't shot in the neck. So they would just use different types of grease paint and shadowing. And again, going back to them being artists, they can make your neck look scrawny or whatever it is by the highlights and shadows with it, and using different colors. And of course, the freedom you have with zombies is you can add a big glob of blood, or attach some hunk of whatever, or build up a piece of latex or whatever to do that. So in a sense, I was made up in two ways. The one which under the latex, with the latex piece, actually making up the latex itself, and then the actual bare skin. And it is a little thing where you just have to kind of gently, and you can get help by anybody who is there on the makeup crew, just prying it slowly off. You don't want to rip it off and tear your skin or anything. But there's solvents that you can slip under the edges of the latex slowly, and kind of peel it back, work it off, and it just comes off. So it wasn't a big hassle or anything like that.
Now, did yours take the longest as far as process? Because it seems like your makeup could take at least at that time, 4 or 5 hours. At least that's what it looked like with the road trip, and compared to all the other zombies. Or was it just purely focused on you? Or was that individual for each zombie, or was everybody in the same room and everybody just basically was just worked on like in a rotational clock in a way?
There were different makeup artists working all in one large room. When Howard was doing me, as far as I know, he was doing no one but me. He was with me the entire time. Now, he may have walked away while something dried or something like that for a minute, but he came right back. So they did you zombie by zombie by zombie. It was sort of the zombie assembly line of that. But they had different people doing it, and I'm sure the experience of each of the makeup artists indicated what type of makeups that they were doing. And Howard was very experienced at the time, and certainly gained a lot more experience over the years, but he was extremely good, obviously, at the time. But so I was just I was his guy and he was my guy for the length of it. And it did take a couple hours, I guess, around that, but it wasn't a really prolonged, uncomfortable process in any way. I've done other things since then where they would take 4 or 5 hours to do something on you, but with this, for the amazing result that they got, it wasn't quick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. You weren't sitting there wondering if it's the following day yet or something like that. It was just a couple of hours, I would say, at most.
Now, how many pieces was actually added to this? Was it one big piece? Because it looked like there was like a multiple, like including the paints, including any kind of accessories to the makeup, the face especially. Like, was there multiple pieces? Or was it like just one big piece?
As far as I recall, it was just one large piece that covered the forehead entirely, came down over both eyes, and the part of the cheeks, just holding it on there like that. And of course, while they're doing it to me, I'm not like privy to everything they're doing. I'm not watching or questioning or anything that too much. So there could have been something else going on, but I would say 95% certain it was just the one piece, and I took it off at the end of the day. It was just that it was all stuck together. And my hair, they just matted my hair down with green goop. You're all wet and it's cold and it's, the gunk they're putting on you, but that's part of the fun. That's why you're doing it, because this is like, it's like playing dress up on being in a cool monster movie. So it's like, if you're into that, and I certainly was, I was like, yeah, man, this is like, do what you will. It was just, it was great.
And after the process was done and after the scenes were done and the film eventually wrapped up, was there ever a point where you got to actually have to view this, or did you have to wait till the movie actually just came out? Was there ever any special viewing for the zombies itself, or was it just like a hearty thank you and anything like that?
It was just a thank you, and here's your hat, and here's your dollar bill, and that was it. And then I actually don't even remember seeing the movie for the first time. I was anxiously awaiting it for the time it takes, because it's obviously the rest of the shoot, but then there's the whole post-production process, which could take many, many months. But definitely was something I was waiting to see. But there wasn't a big screening or anything like that for the zombies. We were just fans who were thrilled to be there to do what we could, and so I had to wait for it like everybody else.
And when you did see this, or by the time you had a chance of this, like what the outcome as far as the popularity goes at that time, had either mixed or even negative. Like, what was your initial reaction for that? Like you said yourself at that time, you were young. I mean, did you ever felt like you felt like you did your best shot, but you still stood by George on this, even though, or did you feel like, oh man, this is gonna, not do so well in my future career?
At that time, hadn't, other than a few plays, I hadn't done any other films. I was certainly thinking about it. It wasn't something that I was worried about would hurt me in any way, certainly, and it wasn't something that I thought would help either. It was just like that one individualized experience. I do remember when it came out, I think a lot of the negativity toward it could have, and this was my theory, which I remember, is that Night of the Living Dead, everybody knows what a farmhouse is. So you felt the claustrophobia. You know what a house is. You know how big that house is. And so if zombies are trying to get you, you know what your limited space is. In the mall, obviously, it's a much bigger space, but everybody's very familiar with the mall. So you know with your limited spaces, they're out there. With the mind, one of the concepts of just having a mind is that there are all these tunnels and random places and stuff. So it was a different type of setting because the claustrophobia was not in a known space that the average moviegoer would have recognized. So I think, in a sense, the claustrophobia, if people were expecting that in some way, they didn't get the claustrophobia because they weren't familiar with the space, as we were being in the space. But for the common, everyday guy watching the movie, wouldn't have been something they would be familiar with. But I also think that there was such a love of Dawn of the Dead that, like we were talking earlier, how things progress and advance, like onto the Land of the Dead, like it did, and all of that. There was a progression of story in Day of the Dead. So maybe people wanted Dawn of the Dead 2, which would have been very silly. And I don't think something that George would have responded to doing. He wanted to say, okay, what's the next step? What's the next chapter? So you had to go with that. And if you resisted it, then you would maybe not be a fan of the movie as much initially. But that's also why I think it grew. Because that initial reaction when expectations were not met in one way, on subsequent viewings, you can come to appreciate what really was done now that you can leave your expectations behind. This is still a really cool movie, and you can get into it for what George meant it to be.
And there you have it, everybody. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this? Are there any cons or any other kind of events or even some projects that you also want to plug in right now?
Next project coming out on August 23rd, just very shortly, premiering at Fright Fest in London, England, is Pig Hill. It's directed by Kevin Lewis, who directed Nicolas Cage film Willy's Wonderland. It stars Rainey Qualley, who's Margaret Qualley's sister from The Substance, Rainey Qualley, Shane West from Nikita, Shiloh Fernandez from Evil Dead 2013, who's also now doing the new Christopher Nolan film Odyssey. But Pig Hill, written by Jared Burris, and that's one of those films that Marty Schiff was also a producer on from all of the George films. So that's coming out August 23rd at Fright Fest. Distribution following that at some point soon. So hopefully everybody can catch that. But George actually started so many things for me because I ended up doing half a dozen different projects with him, worked on some of his scripts subsequently later on as well. And so I'm just very eternally grateful for getting started and I'm happy that all these years later, we just had our 40th anniversary with this, with Day of the Dead, that I'm still at it, still making films, and some of them horror films, as Pig Hill is. So I'm happy for the beginnings that he gave me.
And there you have it, everybody. That is Jeff Monahan.